All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. We're taking a really fascinating dive into the world of fish keeping today. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What on earth does an aquarium have to do with the broader human experience? Well, as we're going to see from these incredible notes penned by an aquarist named Ang, figuring out the logistics of keeping one very specific, beautiful little fish can actually reveal a profound truth about human nature. It's a story about aesthetics, the harsh realities of space, and ultimately, personal resolve.
It all boils down to one simple question. Should we explore the Denison barb? This is the central dilemma our author Ang has been wrestling with. Literally every piece of data, every observation, and every realization we're about to unpack stems directly from this single lingering question. And by the end of this explainer, we aren't just going to figure out if this fish belongs in a tank, we're going to see exactly why the process of deciding teaches us so much about ourselves.
So, moving right into Section 1, the object of desire. Why this specific fish?
Sahyadria-denisonii. That's the scientific name for the Denison barb. And according to Ang's notes, out of all the fish species out there in the hobby, this is the one. This is the one that has constantly tempted them, crossing their mind moon after moon. It's not just a passing phase, It's a highly tempting species that holds this intense gravity for aquarium hobbyists. But what is it exactly that drives that temptation?
Let's look at Section 2, Aesthetics and Comparisons.
Well, when it comes to aesthetics, the Denison barb is an absolute stunner. It's a real showstopper. Ang highlights 3 specific physical traits that make it so irresistible. First up, they have these incredibly slender bodies, giving them this sleek, almost elegant profile in the water. Second, they rock this very prominent horizontal black stripe running right down their sides. And third, my absolute favorite part, right at the head, there's this distinctive, beautiful splash of red. It's just a strikingly gorgeous combination of colors and shapes that immediately grabs your attention.
To really drive this point home, Ang gives us a direct comparison. In a previous post, they actually talked about another fish, the banded-leporinus, or leporinus-fasciatus. But put them head-to-head on the aesthetic scale, no contest. The Denison barb with that slender form and those sharp red and black markings is definitively prettier in the author's eyes. It completely leaves the banded-leporinus in the dust. Aesthetically speaking, the Denison barb wins hands down.
But here's where it gets tricky. Section 3, the challenge of sexing.
The core biological hurdle here is that males and females of the Denison barb are nearly identical. Seriously, there are only very, very slight differences between the sexes. Based on Ang's research, trying to sex them just by looking at a single fish in a tank is famously difficult. You absolutely cannot just glance at their colors or fins and know what you're dealing with.
Because they're basically identical twins, aquarists have to play detective and rely on behavioral cues instead. Ang actually outlines this specific 3-step puzzle-solving method just to identify a male Denison barb. Step 1, you can't just buy 1 or 2, you have to keep them in a group of 6 to 8 in a single tank. Step 2, you have to closely watch their social dynamics to figure out which is the dominant fish. And then, Step 3, you observe the behavior. The dominant male typically has the tendency to chase the females within that group. It's this whole complex behavioral test just to figure out the sexes of the fish you already own.
Which brings us to the logistics. Section 4, Price and Space Hurdles. I really want to pause on this number, 6 to 8. This isn't just some random suggestion. It represents sheer volume. If you want to successfully keep and actually understand the Denison barb, you are committing to a pretty sizable group. You can't just dip your toe in. You've got to dive all the way in with a whole school of 6 to 8 fish.
And bringing 6 to 8 of these incredibly active fish into your home? Well, that triggers some massive immediate hurdles. Even though the Denison barb itself isn't a giant fish, keeping a whole group of them means you need a massive tank. They need a ton of space to swim actively, and you need enough room to actually keep them separated if that chasing behavior gets a little too aggressive. Plus, on top of the physical real estate in your home, there is a major financial cost. Anxie specifically points out that the price point to acquire these fish, especially a whole school of them, is incredibly steep. So you're looking at a stunning fish, sure, but one that demands a huge chunk of change and a massive amount of physical tank space.
So, what happens next? Section 5, the final verdict.
This is the question that brings the whole shebang together. You've got this intense aesthetic desire for this beautiful, slender, red and black fish. But stacked right up against that, you've got the high price tag, the huge tank requirement, and this really difficult space-consuming sexing process. So do those hurdles outweigh the desire? Are they actually enough to stop our author from finally making the purchase? Well, the verdict is in. Aang decides they're putting it on hold. Yep, after all the temptation, all the late-night contemplation, the author chose radical honesty over a sudden impulse buy. Because they had these lingering doubts about the price and the sheer size of the tank, they decided they shouldn't explore the species right now. But honestly, the reasoning why they put it on hold is the most profound takeaway of this entire explainer.
I want you to really absorb this quote directly from the author's notes. If you really want something that much in life, you will find ways to achieve it regardless of the obstacles. Think about that for a second. Aang realized that their hesitation wasn't actually about the price tag of the fish or finding room for a giant glass box in their house. The hesitation came from a lack of deep, absolute focus on this specific end goal. Because if they truly, deeply wanted the Denison Barb above absolutely everything else, they would have just bought the bigger tank and paid the money without a second thought.
And that is the core life lesson we can all take away from this little fish-keeping dilemma. When you truly want an end goal, hurdles like tank size, or money, or complex behavioral puzzles, they aren't even seen as obstacles anymore. You just tackle them. The very fact that you are viewing a hurdle as an obstacle is often a massive red flag that your focus on the goal just isn't absolute. When that focus is locked in, the obstacles just disappear. They literally just become the necessary steps on the path to getting what you want.
Which leaves us with this final, powerful question for you to reflect on today. Think about the things you're putting on hold in your own life right now. Are the reasons you're waiting truly insurmountable hurdles? Or, kind of like our author contemplating the Denison Barb, are those quote-unquote obstacles in your life actually just a lack of true, absolute desire for the end goal? It's a wild way to evaluate our priorities, isn't it? And to think it was all sparked by a beautiful little fish with a splash of red on its head. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.